Through the ages, I became rich and prosperous through my supernatural abilities. Introduction. From the end of the world, I directly pierced through the souls of the little pitiful era. Su Qing expressed that she is not afraid. She has a woody ability in her body, so she can hit 1, 2, and a pair. Beating and saving people is not a bad thing, getting rich and making a family, and then kidnapping a beautiful boy and child. Chapter 1. What is the situation? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Auntie Sue, it was originally agreed that you would give Sanya a stone as my daughter. In law, but now it has been changed to area. You are not authentic, we have given a dowry of 300 yuan. In the quieter night, most of the people in Lihua village had already fallen asleep, and candles were still lit in the lobby of Su's old house. A woman with a sharp voice was very dissatisfied and said, "Hey, Shidu's mother. Our second daughter is also a pure and innocent girl's family. You won't be at a disadvantage if we make sure to your daughter. In law." Mrs. Su smiled and poured a glass of sugar water for the woman, saying, "Cut, don't think I don't know. Your 2 daughters are all disfigured, you're just an ugly monster. My family's rock is in big trouble." Shirtu Nyang took a sip of sugar water and couldn't help but pout, really stingy. She put in so much sugar and dug out flowers. "Oh, my goodness." Su Lao Tai hurriedly said, "My second daughter can do some work. She's good at both home and abroad. When she goes to your house, won't you be able to wait for the ready-made ones? You can try your best in the future, it will save a lot of effort." Shirtu Nyang lowered her head and pursed her mouth again, really thinking she didn't know the twists and turns inside. If it weren't for his family Stone being a fool, he had killed 2 daughters-in-law before, and their son family's reputation was so bad that Stone couldn't please his wife anymore. She wouldn't have bothered to listen to this old lady's deceit. Shirtu Nyang thought for a moment and said, "Auntie Sue, look at this. Not only have you changed people, but we also have to accompany you in acting. If we offer an additional 300 yuan dowry, we might lose too much, right? The dowry money needs to be reduced." As soon as Mrs. Su heard that she wanted to lower the dowry, she immediately felt a little heartbroken. But when she thought about what Sanya said, she felt that it wasn't a loss. So she said, "Okay, Shidu's mother, let's sum it up. How much money will you give us for this dowry? Let's talk about it first. I won't accept too much reduction." "Okay," Shirtu Nyang nodded. "Let's add it up." Suqing was lost in thought, only to hear these sounds ringing in her ears intermittently, far and near. She had always had excellent hearing, and after listening to the conversation between these 2 people, she couldn't help but frown slightly. She thought to herself, "It's already the end of the world, why are we still talking about money? Shouldn't we exchange supplies?" Immediately, Su Qing was awakened and realized that she had been tied up. At this moment, she was lying in a rudimentary room with a pile of firewood piled up in the corner. Was that firewood? Well, what's going on? She encountered a zombie wave with the team and was drowned out by the zombie wave. She hadn't forgotten the pain of the zombie's foul-smelling mouth gnawing on her flesh and blood. In theory, she couldn't survive, but what is the situation now? Just as she was thinking about it, the door suddenly creaked, as if someone had pushed it open. Su Qing quickly closed her eyes and looked as if she was still unconscious. The third maid of the Su family, Su Tao, entered the room. Su Tao carefully pushed open the door and saw that Su Qing was still unconscious in bed with her hands tied back. She raised her lips and smiled, looking at Su Qing's eyes with malice and relief. Su Tao closed the door and came to Su Qing's bed, murmuring softly, "Su Qing, I'm so happy that you're here today. Congratulations, your days will become more and more exciting in the future. I really want to see how that fool beat you up." Su Tao has always hated Su Qing since she was young, because when second uncle and second auntie were around, Su Qing was like the little princess of their Su family. Even such a son-over-daughter mistress wouldn't say a harsh word to Su Tao, let alone second uncle and second auntie. They only have one daughter, so they really spoil Su Qing endlessly. And for her, because she had a biological younger brother, her parents let her give way to him, and the bias was so extreme. The result was good. She had the lowest status in the entire Su family, and anyone could shout at her. Although Su Qing had never treated her that way before, she just hated Su Qing, who made Su Qing compare her so badly. So, she wants to ruin Su Qing's whole life. The humiliations she suffered in her childhood must be repaid by Su Qing for her whole life, so that her heart can be more comfortable. After listening to Su Tao's words, although Su Qing was puzzled by the current environment, she still honestly closed her eyes and pretended to be dizzy. She wanted to figure it out as soon as possible and find out her current situation at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Su Tao was still whispering incessantly, "Don't you know? The scar on your face was intentionally scalded with hot water by me, or do you know, but you know what else? You're not Su Qing from the past, no one's used to you anymore, and you can only endure it, right? I'm so happy. Your face should be uglier than mine." Su Qing's heart was filled with anger upon hearing this bastard. Seeing that Su Qing still hadn't woken up, Su Tao felt a bit regretful that Su Qing couldn't listen to her words clearly. However, she didn't dare to wake Su Qing up, afraid that if Su Qing started shouting and yelling, it would ruin the plan when she turned around. "By the way, there's something you definitely don't know yet," Su Tao said with a hint of pride in her voice. "It was my idea to ask you to marry that fool from the Sun family. How about that? Isn't it great? You just have to wait, I can't wait to see the moment your reputation falls apart." After speaking, Su Tao wanted to come forward and slap Su Qing fiercely, but after thinking about it, she didn't take any action. So she gave Su Qing a fierce glare and quietly left the room. After Su Tao left, Su Qing slowly opened her eyes. From Su Tao's words, she caught some information. But now, is it that she has traveled through time? Just as she thought of this, Su Qing's head suddenly hurt, and a memory flooded into her mind. The pain made Su Qing frown. Fortunately, her willpower was strong enough, so she didn't faint. After a while, Su Qing finally sorted out the memories in her mind. These memories were about a girl's brief 16-year life. Su Qing sorted out the memories and couldn't help but feel infinite emotions in her heart. She was really a little pitiful. "It's just that. Since you don't want to continue, I'll go down for you and repair those who have harmed you." Chapter 2, I'll rely on you tomorrow morning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, in the hall, the discussion between Old Lady Su and Stone Lady finally came to an end, and the dowry money was reduced to 260 yuan, which both sides were quite satisfied with. After looking at the sky outside, Mrs. Su said, "Shirtu, it's getting late too. Let Shirtu enter your house." "Okay, I'll listen to you." Shirtu Nyang nodded. Mrs. Su took Shirtu Nyang into the inner room, where Mr. Su was sitting on the Kong with Shirtu, staring big and small. Mr. Su usually doesn't pay much attention to the affairs of the Su family, just letting Mrs. Su keep busy. As long as he can eat and drink well himself, he doesn't care much about anything else. But now, looking at the chubby black man in front of him with a chubby grin and a sizzling grin, Old Su has a physiological nausea. He complains in his heart that Old Su has been talking to Stone Lady for too long, but he hopes they can take the stone away quickly. He just wants to rest quickly. So, after seeing Mrs. Su and Mrs. Stone enter the inner room, Mr. Su breathed a sigh of relief in secret and pretended to be dignified. "Have we all agreed?" "It's agreed. Both the son, daughter-in-law, and the old man are unwilling to get involved in today's matter, but Mrs. Su really likes the feeling of being in power. Okay, then hurry up and finish the task. Let's rest early. Old Su nodded. Line. Old Lady Su and Stone Mother coaxed Stone out of the room. Mother, I want a daughter. Law. Stone chuckled foolishly, his chubby and silly figure tugging at Stone's sleeve, twisting like a black bear dancing ballet. Seeing Su Lao Tai's eyes piercing, she couldn't even look straight at her. Let's go to my second maid's house. Mrs. Su walked quickly and led the way ahead. At this moment, Su Qing, lying in the woodshed, had already heard that old Lady Su was about to send that fool over. In her previous life, she had a healing and controlling woody ability that could not only communicate with plants, but also carry green mist and gray mist absorbed from plants in a gossip pool in the palm of her hand. Green mist can treat diseases, while gray mist can make people faint. In fact, it was equivalent to the function of anesthesia. Fortunately, the woody ability in this life has followed, and the bagua pool has also followed. Although there is less green mist and gray mist in it, it is still sufficient for the time being. Mrs. Su opened the door to the firewood room and led Stone and Stone Mother in. When she saw Su Qing still unconscious in bed, she whispered to Stone Mother, "Here, this is our second daughter." Taking advantage of the moonlight shining outside the window, Shirtu Nyang looked at Su Qing. She was yellow and thin, with hair like dry grass and a large scar on her left face, which was quite ugly. However, fortunately, she was a big yellow flower girl, which made Shirtu Nyang quite satisfied. She kindly patted Shitu's hand and said softly, "Shirtu, it will be your wife from now on. You will sleep with her tonight." Hee, daughter. Law, daughter. Law. Sure looked at Su Qing on the bed, his eyes lit up, and Su Qing's stomach turned sour. But at this moment, she had to pretend to be unconscious. She had a plan in her mind, but it wasn't time yet. "Yes, this is your daughter. Law. Go sleep with your daughter. Law quickly." Shirtu Nyang smiled and pushed the stone towards the bed, watching as it was about to climb onto the bed. She quickly pulled Mrs. Su out of the woodshed and closed the door. Although she loved to listen to her daughter. Law and son's corner, it was in the Su family. At least she had to restrain herself, so that Mrs. Su, this old thing, wouldn't come back and talk to her about it. Mrs. Su also laughed heartily. She had received the dowry of 260 yuan, which could be considered useful for this lowly girl. In the firewood room, as Su Laotai and Shirtu Nyang walked away, the fool had already crawled onto the bed with a silly smile. Su Qing suddenly opened her eyes, and the rope tied to her hands behind her had long been untied by her. At this moment, she waved her right hand towards the stone, and a grey mist rushed towards Shitu's face. When Shir saw Su Qing open his eyes, he excitedly called out to his wife. His eyes sparkled with violence and excitement, and he could ride his wife again. And the next moment, the stone felt dizzy and black in front of him, and he fell into the bed. How could Su Qing possibly let the stone fall to the ground? With just one hand, she easily grabbed the black fat man weighing over 200 pounds onto the bed. Looking at the corner of the black fat man's mouth, Su Qing couldn't help but curl her lips in disgust and vigorously rubbed her hand against the broken quilt on the bed. She thinks it's dirty. After a while, the entire Su family's old house turned dark and everyone rested. Su Qing didn't worry and continued to sit on the bed in the firewood room. After about an hour, when the continuous snoring began, Su Qing quietly left the firewood room and sent some fog to every room. Not long after, the snoring disappeared. Su Qing just returned to the firewood room and carried the stone to Su Tao's room. Speaking of which, the Su family's old house now has 2 rooms and a part of the yard that belongs to Su Qing. Back then, her mother forcefully separated the house from the old house, and after dividing the 2 rooms, she also built a yard along the way. Unfortunately, after Su Qing's mother abandoned Su Qing was taken back to the old Su family by Su Laotai on the grounds of being young. She not only occupied Su Qing's house yard, but also enslaved Su Qing for 6 years. During these 6 years, Su Qing was a little maid in the Su family, not only doing household chores, but also doing household chores. Working hard to earn work points, the well-behaved and agile little girl was tormented to her current emaciated appearance. And Su Qing only has a wooden room for sleeping in Su's old house, while others have spacious separate rooms to live in. Even Su Tao from Su Lao San's family has a separate room to live in. And this has facilitated Su Qing's plan for tonight. Su Qing picked up the stone and gently pushed open the door of Su Tao's room. At this moment, Su Tao had fallen into a deep sleep due to the fog, unaware of everything around her. Su Qing looked at Su Tao in her sleep, recalling her memories of what Su Tao had done and what she had just said. She squinted her eyes and without hesitation, placed the stone next to Su Tao. At the same time, she stripped the two of their clothes to the point where only their vests and shorts were left. Then, she placed the stone's hand on Su Tao's chest and sent them a cloud of fog, ensuring that they would not be disturbed by any noise tomorrow morning. Finally, she kindly helped them cover their blankets. Look, how thoughtful she is. Subsequently, Su Qing took a look at Su Tao's room under the moonlight. Su Tao liked flowers and there were several flower pots in the room, which were planted with landmine flowers. Because landmine flowers have the effect of removing mosquitoes, Su Tao had several pots. At this moment it was late summer and early autumn, and the landmine flowers had already grown many black seeds. Su Qing couldn't help but walk up to one of the landmine flowers with a smile on her face, and gently touched it with her hand. The landmine flowers seemed to feel something, and when there was no wind, they automatically rose up and shook their branches and leaves toward Su Qing, as if greeting her. Su Qing whispered softly, "I'll rely on you tomorrow morning." Chapter 3. Acting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Auntie Sue, we're here. Early in the morning, a few women were knocking on the door outside the courtyard of the old Su family, shouting towards the courtyard while knocking on the door. There is a very large pomegranate tree in the backyard of Lao Su's family, which has been planted for many years. However, it is unknown whether it is because the Su family does not know how to plant it. Every autumn, they cannot produce a few pomegranates, but even so, these pomegranates are rare fruits in this era. Mrs. Su always treasures them tightly and never distinguishes them from outsiders. I don't know why this year, and I don't know what tricks Mrs. Su has opened up. She actually told them that she could come to his house today to pick pomegranates. Although a person can only pick one, with so many seeds in one pomegranate, it is enough for everyone in the family to have a sweet mouth. So early in the morning, these women came to Lao Su's house in groups. Su Qing, lying in the firewood room, immediately raised her eyebrows upon hearing these movements. It seemed that the show was about to begin. She quickly tied the rope she had tied herself to before and then lay quietly in bed waiting for the show to begin. Here we are. Mrs. Su woke up the earliest and heard the sound of calling outside. She quickly woke up Shitun Yang, gesturing for her to be prepared, and then ran into the yard to open the door. "Auntie Su, we're here to pick pomegranates." Afraid that Mrs. Su might suddenly change her mind, when she opened the door, the women quickly greeted Mrs. Su with a smile and directly asked the question. Okay. Mrs. Su heard a few people say they were going to pick pomegranates, and secretly cursed them for being shameless. She was so fond of taking advantage of them, but it was she who called them in. She had to rely on these people as witnesses later, so she smiled and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to the backyard right now." A few women looked at each other and were surprised to see that they were really allowed to pick pomegranates. It was like the sun was shining in the west. However, before a few people could walk with Mrs. Su to the backyard, Shitun Yang came out of the house and said, "Aunt Su, where is my son?" "Ouch, I came to your house as a guest. Why did my son still get lost?" Didn't your stone fall asleep inside the house? Mrs. Su said unknowingly. Yo, Auntie Su, are you a relative from your family? A woman asked with a smile. The woman's surname was Lu and her name was Lu Tsuehua. At the age of 40, the villagers all called her Auntie Tsuehua. Yes, I'm a sisters with her mother. In law. She took her son to see me instead of her mother. In law. Old Mrs. Su smiled. Shitun Yang looked anxious and said, oh my, I just went to see. There's no one inside. My son is not even in the room. This room is just so big. Where can my son go? As she spoke, Stone Mother slapped her face with a burnt expression. Hey, don't worry, let's look for it first. Yes, don't worry for now. Let's look for it first. When someone comes to Lao Su's house, how could they possibly lose it? Our Lihua village has never lost any adults or children before, it's peaceful. Aunt Tsuehua and several others were also busy persuading. Shitun Yang calmed down and suddenly looked like she had a sudden realization. By the way, your second daughter was flirting with my son yesterday, wouldn't she seduce him late at night? Don't talk nonsense, Mrs. Su pretended to be displeased. Arya. That child shouldn't be so timid. How could he do such a thing? Yeah, don't talk nonsense. Tsuehua Auntie and several others were also busy talking about Su Qing's situation. Most villagers have a sense of pity for this little girl, but it's actually the household chores of the old Su family. Su Qing has never said to find someone to help her handle things fairly, so it's not easy for the big guy to get in the way. Moreover, Su Laotai has said that whoever helps Su Qing take care of her will take care of her. Nowadays, everyone's family is not tight, and they are all struggling. How can they still afford to raise an outsider? But at this moment, when they heard Shitun Yang speak up, Su Qing's reputation was ruined. They couldn't bear to see it, and they all helped Su Qing say a few words. Shitun Yang jumped and said, is that right? Just take a look and you'll know. Let's see if I've wronged your second daughter. As she spoke, she walked towards the wooden house where Su Qing lived. Seeing Su Qing living in the wooden house, Aunt Tsuehua and the others glanced at each other, feeling even more disdainful towards the behavior of the old Su family. Su Qing had been listening to the commotion in the yard all along. At this moment, she saw Shituniang and everyone coming to catch the traitor. She sneered in her heart and quickly squeezed out a few tears. When the door to the firewood room opened, she weakly shouted, help, help. When they saw the situation in the room, whether it was Old Lady Su and Stone Lady, or the women from Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com or Tsuehua Auntie, they couldn't help but be stunned. Old Lady Su and Stone Mother looked at the bed in the firewood room with some foolishness. Where is Stone? Last night, the stones were clearly delivered to this room, but what about people now? Tsuehua Auntie saw Su Qing lying in bed with her hands tied back and a weak expression on her face, and couldn't help but feel angry. She turned to look at Su Laotai and said, Auntie Su, why are you still tying up Arya? Arya is a little girl. What did she do wrong to make you treat her like this? You. Mrs. Su had not yet reacted from her confusion, staring blankly at Su Qing, who was crying all over her face. Seeing that Mrs. Su didn't say anything, a few women quickly came forward and untied the rope on Su Qing's body, comforting her. Arya, don't be afraid. If you have any grievances, tell your aunts. Looking at Su Qing, whose face was yellow, skinny, and hair was dry, the eyes of several aunties were a bit hot. This child has suffered a lot in recent years. Woo-woo. Su Qing's face was filled with fear and grievance, and tears streamed down her face. At this moment, Shitun Yang reacted and jumped her feet, saying, Where's Shitu, where's my son? Oh, where's my big one? My son. I didn't see any stones in Su Qing's room, and Stone Mother was really panicked. Su Qing sneered in her heart and secretly communicated with the landmine flower in Su Tao's room. The landmine flower shook and 2 or 3 black seeds flew out, hitting Su Tao's forehead. Ouch! Su Tao was awakened by a landmine seed and felt a bit confused as she wanted to rub her forehead. However, her hand did not lift, as if it was being pressed down by something. Hey, no, how do you feel like there's someone else next to you? Su Tao turned her head in confusion and saw the chubby black man next to her. Ah! Chapter 4 is really lively. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Early in the morning, Su Tao's voice was sharp and high-pitched, which not only startled a few of Mrs. Su who were staying in the firewood room, but also woke up Su, who was still sleeping soundly, as well as Su Tao's parents and younger brother, including the sleeping stone. Shi opened his eyes in a daze and saw Su Tao looking at him with a frightened gaze. Shi was too familiar with such a frightened gaze and liked it very much. He liked the way women were frightened in front of him. Suddenly, Shi became excited and shouted for his wife. With a bare pounce, he threw Su Tao, who was in a state of panic and confusion, onto the bed. At this moment, Su Tao realized that she wanted to escape, but she couldn't break free from the shackles of the stone. The black and chubby body of the stone pressed against her, almost making her gasp for breath. You let go of me, you bastard, let go of me, help. Help, Su Tao cried out in a slightly broken state. She couldn't understand why the stone that should be on Su Qing's bed inexplicably arrived in her room and even ran to her bed. Daughter.in.law, daughter.in.law. Stone didn't care about so much. He only had excitement in his eyes now, and Su Tao's crying made him even more excited. He grabbed Su Tao's chest hard, not only tearing her already thin vest, but also leaving 2 bloody scratches on her chest. Ah! Suddenly, there was a chill in her chest, coupled with the sudden pain, which made Su Tao collapse and shout. She pounded the stone's arm with both hands and said, "You let go of me, go away, you should be on Su Qing's bed. Go away, Su Qing is your wife." Daughter.in.law, daughter.in.law. Stone didn't care what Su Tao said. All he knew was that his mother brought him to a room yesterday and said that the woman in the room was his daughter.in.law. So, the woman in front of him now was his daughter.in.law. Ignoring Su Tao's crying, Stone kissed her face, and the bad breath emanating from his mouth made Su Tao almost nauseous. "What are you doing?" The first ones to push open Su Tao's room were Su Tao's parents, Su Xingli and Tian Aixiang. Su Xingli was the 3rd son of Su Lao Tai and Su Lao Tu, and also their youngest son. Pushing open the door and seeing a stone pressing against Su Tao, Su Xingli felt a surge of blood rushing straight into his head. If someone found out that his daughter was still unmarried and was fooling around in the room, would she still be able to marry in the future? Not to mention his daughter, it will be difficult for his son to marry in the future. Which good family is willing to marry their daughter in? Su Xingli stepped forward and grabbed the stone. The stone was not on guard and was pulled down from Su Tao by Su Xingli. Su Xingli punched the stone in the face and said, "I'll beat your grandson to death. This bastard is trying to damage their family's reputation." Su Xingli just thinks it's not an exaggeration to beat this bastard to death. However, Su Xingli has some doubts in his heart. Although this stone should be in Su Qing's room, why did it just run into his daughter's room? But Tian Aixiang slapped Su Tao in the face and said, "You damn girl, what good thing have you done? Are you going to kill your younger brother?" Su Tao felt extremely aggrieved. She cried, covering her face, and collapsed, shouting, "It's not me, it's not me, it's Su Qing. It's that dead girl from Su Qing who caused me trouble." At this moment, Shituniang, Su Lao Tai, and Suehua Anti all followed the sound and arrived at the door of Su Tao's room. Originally, Su Laotai did not want Suehua Auntie and the others to come. After all, their family reputation could not be exposed. However, these few people were specially selected by Su Laotai, and she liked to talk about parental gossip the most. However, she specially brought a big loudspeaker for Su Qing. Such a gossipy person could not be easily persuaded to leave by Su Laotai. So, it can be said that old lady Su simply lifted a stone and smashed her own foot. Ouch, this is. Suehua Auntie looked at the appearance of Su Tao and Shir in the room, where didn't she know what had happened? But suddenly, Suehua Auntie remembered the behavior of Shir Yang and Su Laotai just now. As soon as they entered the yard, they were led to Su Qing's room, claiming that Su Qing's girl had seduced a man. Then, when she thought about Su Qing's tragic appearance just now, Suehua Auntie suddenly realized that this was not pulling them to be used as guns, was it? Although Aunt Suehua loves gossiping, at least she still has sympathy. Suddenly, Aunt Suehua's gaze at Su Laotai and Shir Yang was not right. But Shir Yang didn't even care about Aunt Suehua's gaze. When she saw Su Xingli grabbing the stone and hitting it, she became furious and scratched Su Xingli hard twice. If you dare to hit my son, you must be shameless and bully a child. The stone couldn't beat Su Xingli. When he saw his own mother coming, he immediately cried and said, "Mother, the stone hurts and needs to be blown." This made Shir Yang so heartbroken that she gave Su Xingli a big mouth and said, "You bastard, my son is going to be beaten up by you." Tian Aixiang saw that her own man had been beaten by Shir Yang, so she was not willing to comply. She left Su Tao and rushed over to Shir Yang, pulling her hair with one hand and scratching her face with the other. "If you dare to hit my man, go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to see if I don't scratch you to death. You're a little girl. If you want to hit someone, go home and hit your own man. Don't show off your authority outside. Oh my, dare you beat me up? I'll see if I can beat you to death." Shir Yang's hair was torn and her face was scratched twice. She wasn't a soft persimmon either, so she immediately grabbed Tian Aixiang's hair and the two of them started pinching in front of everyone. Both of them were skilled fighters, and before the people around them could react, they each had a few bloodstains on their faces. A few strands of hair were scattered in the morning light that spilled into the room through the window. And Su Xingli and Shir Tu were also pinched together. It turned out that Shir Tu was planning to catch Su Tao with a smile, but he was caught by Su Xingli. Su Tao was just scared enough by the stone's actions, and was slapped by her own mother. Seeing so many people breaking into her room, she was both angry and furious, and cried out in despair. She quickly wrapped herself up in a blanket. "Stop it, everyone, stop it." Mrs. Su was so angry. What was this called? It was clear that the stone was sent to Su Qing's dead girl's room, so why did she run to Su Tao's room? But Mrs. Su's shouting seemed to be of little use. When Shir Yang saw that Su Xingli was about to hit a stone, she wanted to go and beat Su Xingli. How could Tian Aixiang be willing, so she naturally held on to Shir Yang and didn't let go. However, Shir Yang was beaten by Su Xingli and cried loudly, mixed with Su Tao's crying of collapse. For a moment, Su Tao's room was filled with excitement. Finally, Aunt Suehua and a few others came forward to help, and with the roar of old Su who arrived, they had only separated. Looking at their disheveled bodies, Aunt Suehua and the others quietly exchanged glances, all secretly poking and waiting for the show. Not to mention, this old Su family was really lively this morning. Chapter 5. What is your dog's name? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Su Tao wrapped herself up in a blanket, only revealing her head. Looking at so many people in the room, especially the aunts and aunties who loved gossip the most in the village, she suddenly felt a sense of darkness in front of her. It's over. If these aunts and aunties go out and talk about it, what else can I have a good reputation for? No, she needs to save herself. Wow, Su Tao burst into tears and shouted at Mrs. Su, Milk, it's Su Qing who caused me trouble, it's Su Qing who caused me trouble. I don't know anything, Milk, you have to make the decision for me. Old Lady Su was so angry that her hair went dizzy. She had originally agreed with the Sun family to send Su Tao to be the daughter-in-law of Shirshir. After all, Su Tao is good-looking, so naturally the Sun family gave her a lot of dowry money. It was Su Tao who told her that if she could marry into the county in the future, not only would she receive more dowries, but she could also help the future of the Su family's grandchildren and bring benefits to the Su family. Therefore, she listened to Su Tao's words and replaced Su Tao with Su Qing. She also listened to Su Tao's idea and planned to let Su Qing bear the reputation of seducing men. In this way, not only would it be natural to send Su Qing to the Sun family, but the Su family would not have a bad reputation of selling their granddaughter. It was originally planned well, and the eldest son who worked in the county helped Su Tao find a young man who ate commodity grain. He waited to send Su Qing to the Sun family, and then went to see each other in a few days. However, today something like this happened. Well, Su Qing, the dead girl, did harm to her sisters. Tian Ai's fragrance jumped 3 feet high. On the one hand, she felt sorry for her girl, but more angry that her son might not get a good wife because of this. Tian Aixiang said she was going to find Su Qing to settle the accounts. Aunt Suihua flashed and stopped in front of Tian Aixiang. Why, what are you doing? Who can Su Qing harm? I haven't said yet. What are you doing with Su Qing tying her up in the house? Who can you harm if that girl is tied up like that? That's right, that's right. The other women also saw Su Qing's tragic situation and agreed, your Su family is too extreme. Even if they bully a little girl like this, they are not afraid that the victorious army will come back and settle accounts with you. Su Xingjun was Su Qing's biological father and also the second son of Su Laotu and Su Laotai. After 6 years of hunting in the mountains, he encountered a blind bear, but in the end, he couldn't even retrieve his bones. Tian Aixiang shouted in disbelief, our Su family's affairs are none of your business. I'll teach my Su family a lowly girl a lesson, and even ask if you can agree, let me know. A few women became angry upon hearing this and said, Pooh, you're such a big person. You're shameless, and bullying a little girl is just a matter of right. If you go to hell, then Miss Su Qing, who is your niece and daughter, won't be able to bully you as an aunt. However, when saying these words, several women were also a bit guilty. After all, in recent years, they have not been able to intervene in the affairs of the Su family. So, Miss Su Qing has really been bullied by everyone in the Su family for 6 years. But today, since that Su Qing girl is asking for help from them, they have decided on this matter. This is my Su family's business, Tian Aixiang crossed her waist and shouted. Pooh, Aunt Suihua spat and said, 6 years ago, Su Qing's mother split up with your old Su family. The evidence for the split still exists in the village brigade. After all, she is from 2 families with your old Su family, so you should not talk to one family. You. Tian Aixiang was about to speak when Su Qing's weak voice came from outside the room. Aunties, please help me. I don't want to stay with their family anymore. If we stay together again, I may die somewhere in the future. Everyone turned around and saw the thin and weak Su Qing standing against the wall, tears streaming down her face. A few aunts and aunties looked at her with a heart-wrenching expression, one named Tao. They approached and hugged Su Qing with a heart-wrenching expression, saying, You're such a poor girl. Don't worry, Auntie will definitely help you find justice today. Thank you, Auntie. Su Qing wiped her tears with her hand, her face full of gratitude. But in the eyes of the old Su family, it's not like that anymore. Mrs. Su was the first to jump up and say, You dead girl, early in the morning. Who are you pretending to show this to? Are you ruining the reputation of our old Su family? Did our old Su family not give you food or clothing? Who raised you, you ungrateful white-eyed wolf? In front of so many people, Su Qing naturally had to pretend to be weak. She looked scared and hid in Aunt Tao's arms, her eyes full of fear and fear. Seeing this made several aunties feel even more distressed, and they all said, "Aunt Su, that's not right. Look at this girl who raised the child to look like this. It's better to touch her conscience when speaking." Su Qing said in a timely manner, "Milk, is it possible that when I die, my house and yard won't need to be returned to me anymore?" Uncle said, "I'll temporarily take over my father's job and don't need to be returned to me." Too much, too much. After listening to Su Qing's words, several aunts and aunties at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com became even angrier. At this moment, Mrs. Su regretted calling these people to her house. She said angrily, all right, you guys should go back first. If there's something at home today, I won't entertain you. Why, Auntie Su is trying to support us and continue abusing Su Qing, this child. A woman said, I didn't say anything before, but now that Su Qing has spoken up, we auntie who watched her grow up can't let her be bullied anymore. Give your mother a round of farts, Tian Aishiang said, what nonsense are you talking about? Your mother only farts in circles. That woman doesn't say much about Mrs. Su, after all, where is the seniority? But Tian Aishiang doesn't care anymore. They are all peers. Who's afraid of anyone? Early in the morning, the chicken hasn't even woken up. What's your dog's name? You're just barking a dog. Tian Ai's chest was stuffy with fragrance. This morning, it was really unlucky. The house didn't even leave. First, she had a fight with someone, and then someone blocked the door and scolded her. Who did she provoke? Do you have a dog barking? You know it in your heart. The woman didn't lose out either. Who was fighting like a crazy dog just now? Just turned around and forgot, right? The blood stains on your face haven't been wiped clean yet. You. Tian Ai was so fragrant that she wanted to go up and fight with the woman again, but was stopped by Shitun Yang. She had a fight with the Lao Su family early in the morning, which tore her face. She didn't care about acting or not, but she gave all the dowry money to the Lao Su family. She said she had to take a daughter-in-law back today. When they went back, the Lao Su family had nothing to do with her. Stop your business for now, and quickly explain to me. Which girl did your old Su family give to my family as their daughter-in-law? Chapter 6. The Big 8 Trigrams. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Without waiting for others to speak, Su Tao pointed at Su Qing like a madman and said, Su Qing, let Su Qing marry that fool. If I don't go, I won't even go if I die. As soon as Su Tao called Shir a fool, Shitun Yang glared at her fiercely and said, if you dare to scold my Shir again, why don't you give it a try? You cheap girl, you won't die. You've been digging into a man's bed for most of the night. What kind of good thing do you think you are? Speaking of which, Shitun Yang suddenly felt that giving the dowry money of 260 yuan to the Lao Su family would cause them to lose a lot of money. The ferocity of Shitun Yang scared Su Tao back into the blanket, not daring to make a sound. She was also humiliated by Shitun Yang's words and her face turned red. She looked at Su Qing hiding outside the door in Tao Dan Yang's arms, and a hint of malice flashed in her eyes. It's all Su Qing's fault, everything is Su Qing's fault. As long as Su Qing is present, she will be devastated by her. Sooner or later, she will make Su Qing look good. Su Qing remained silent and hid in Aunt Tao's arms, silently shedding tears. People tend to sympathize with the weak. At this moment, the more helpless she appeared, the greater the help she received. How about this girl? Shitun Yang thought to herself, feeling that Su Qing was still a bit wronged by her own Shitu. Compared to Su Tao, she looked much better. Anyway, this girl has already slept on the same bed as my too. No, I didn't. Su Tao shouted in fear. I was killed. I was killed by Su Qing's dead girl. Tian Aixiang is also anxious. She is still looking forward to finding a son.in.law in the county. When the time comes, everyone who enjoys food and drinks spicy food will point to this girl. If she marries the Sun family and becomes the wife of that fool, what benefits can she gain? Not to mention the dowry money. With my mother.in.law around, she can't get a penny out of it. Yes, my girl was harmed by someone. Yes, it's the dead girl Su Qing. Tian Aixiang quickly said, if you want to give your family a stone to take your wife, take Su Qing away. My girl Su Tao, don't even think about it. Mrs. Su glared fiercely at Tian Aixiang. There were still outsiders around, so she boasted loudly about sending out Su Qing, the dead girl, and letting these big mouths spread the word. They didn't want the reputation of the old Su family in the village anymore. You've seen it too. Old Su turned his head and said to Aunt Suehua and the others, this is a big misunderstanding. Our family needs to handle this matter. It's not convenient to keep you for personal matters. You can come back another day. Su Qing secretly bit the meat in her mouth, causing tears to fall down in pain. She shuddered fiercely and said, milk, I don't want to be sold to that fool as my wife. My mother split up with the old house back then, so you can't sell me. I heard about it yesterday. You want to sell me to that fool as my wife. Aunt Suehua and the others became even more angry after hearing this. The old Su family is really going to sell Su Qing, this girl. Damn girl, what nonsense are you talking about? Mrs. Su glared at Su Qing in anger when she saw her talking to her face. Get back to your house, you don't need to be fooling around with family matters. Su Qing trembled even more violently. Aunt Tao felt Su Qing's fear and felt even more sorry for her. She said, Auntie Su, this matter is not the responsibility of your old Su family. We are all going to sell our granddaughter. I think we need to find the team leader and the village branch secretary for this matter. Otherwise, it's uncertain where Su Qing will be secretly sold by you later. Humph, what they saw this morning was that Su Qing was tied up and locked up in the room. They probably wanted to forcibly lock Su Qing and that fool together, but for some reason, that fool ran into Su Tao's room. But it's not important. What's important is that the old Su family really wants to sell Su Qing. Yes, we need to find the team leader and village chief. A woman nodded and said, I'll go find them. She was closest to the main entrance, so without waiting for the people of the Lao Su family to stop her, she quickly ran towards the courtyard entrance. Mrs. Su was so anxious that she shouted, you come back to me. My Su family's family matters, why did you disturb Captain and the others? It's no use, that woman has already run out of Lao Su's yard in a flash. Suddenly, the people of the Lao Su family were all furious. When the team leader and village chief arrived, this matter had to escalate, and it was uncertain what kind of trouble would arise in the future. Old Su was so angry that he slammed his dry tobacco bag against the wall and glared at Su Qing, you must make this house restless before you give up, right? Su Qing looked down on her in her heart. These people from the old Su family are really shameless. They have taken over the original body's property, enslaved the original body for a whole 6 years, and in the end, they have to squeeze out the remaining value of the original body and exchange her for dowry. Now they even say that the original body is a demon. Su Qing continued to play the role of a pitiful little girl, tears streaming down her face, causing Aunt Suehua and others to feel heartbroken. Uncle Su, look for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. You're not right. What is Su Qing stirring up trouble? Is it possible that Su Qing wants to tie herself up in the room? Or is it that Su Qing spends most of the night fooling around with men in the room? Or is it that Su Qing wants to sell herself to a fool as his wife? You've been bullying Su Qing for so many years. Let's see what kind of girl you've become. As an elderly person, no matter how biased you are, you need to have some tolerance. When Xing Jun was there, you didn't mistreat the old couple. You should also try to figure it out. My conscience, don't be too ungrateful. Old Lady Su was so angry at these words that she was about to drive someone away. Let's go, let's go. Our family doesn't welcome you. Auntie Su, today is not up to you. As soon as we leave, Su Qing, this girl, will be sold by your old Su family again. There hasn't been a family selling daughters or granddaughters in our Lihua village for so many years, so we can't let your old Su family ruin the reputation of the village. You. Seeing Auntie Tsuehua refusing to leave, while Stone Mother was still clamoring to take away a daughter. In law, Old Su and Old Su were so angry that they couldn't figure out why things were arranged so smoothly that they were so crooked. Now, it's better that they've made Old Su's family a mess. This room was facing each other, and Zhao Yukai, the captain of Lihua village, and Wang Xiehong, the village branch secretary, had already arrived outside the courtyard of Lao Su's house. Along with them were many villagers from Lihua village. The aunt who went to call out to Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong was also a clever person. She walked from the old Su family to the village branch and told everyone about the old Su family's affairs. In this way, by the time she brought Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong back to the old Su family, all the villagers who followed knew that the old Su family was going to sell Su Qing to a fool as his wife, and that fool had actually become a bunch with Su Tao from the Su family in the middle of the night. This is such big gossip. Chapter 7. How about giving it a try? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, seeing Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong entering the courtyard, and then looking at the villagers inside and outside the courtyard and on the wall, Mrs. Su almost fainted in one breath. What's going on? Zhao Yukai looked at old Su with a tiger-like face. Uncle Su, I heard you want to sell that girl Su Qing. Anything that doesn't exist, everything that doesn't exist, misunderstandings, are all misunderstandings, said old Su quickly. Captain, the village branch secretary, today's matter is all misunderstandings. Don't be biased and believe it. Aunt Tao angrily said, what a misunderstanding, we really heard it. After speaking, he encouraged Su Qing again and said, don't be afraid. Tell the team leader and village branch secretary everything. Su Qing, with red eyes, said to Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong, Captain, village chief, my master's milk is going to sell me. I heard it clearly yesterday that I wanted to resist, so they knocked me unconscious and tied me up in the room, and even wanted to ruin my reputation, asking me to bear the stigma and marry that fool. Speaking, Su Qing pointed to Su Tao's room. At this moment, Su Tao had no chance to wear clothes because there were too many people inside and outside the room. She was still wearing a vest and pants wrapped in a blanket, while Shi was a fool with no shame at all. It was not appropriate to be seen wearing a vest and pants. So when Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong saw the scene in Su Tao's room, they were furious and said, what's this all about? Hurry up and put on your clothes, so many people are watching. There was a young man leaning against the wall, and upon hearing Zhao Youcai's words, he immediately whistled with a smile. Su Tao heard this and wished to dig a crack in the ground to get in. It's over, so many people in the village know about it. What should she do in the future? Before Su Tao could come up with any solution, Tian Aixiang came up and slapped her hard. You shameless thing, why don't you put on your clothes quickly? As she spoke, she drove everyone out of Su Tao's room and picked up the clothes on the ground, throwing them onto Su Tao's face. Su Tao tightly gripped the clothes, her knuckles almost turning white, but at this moment she had no other choice but to tidy herself up first and then slowly think of a way. Su Qing, Su Qing. Su Tao hated Su Qing in her heart. However, Su Qing didn't care about Su Tao's thoughts at this moment. She continued to play the role of her own little pitier, crying with tears on her face, and said to Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong, "Captain, village chief, I dare not live with Yi Nai and her family anymore. I want you to help me make the decision and let Yi Nai return my family belongings to me. I am also 16 years old now and can support myself." "Damn girl, your wings are hard, aren't you? Without us, where would you grow so big? You heartless and heartless white-eyed wolf." As soon as Su Qing heard her say, old lady Su not only wanted to separate from the people of the old Su family, but also returned her belongings, and immediately fled. "Auntie Su, that's not right." Auntie Tsuhua looked disdainfully at Mrs. Su and said, "How have the people of your old Su family been teasing Su Qing these years? Our villagers have all seen it. You've taken over Su Qing's house, yard, and her father's work, not to mention it. You even let Su Qing work as a cow and horse in your old Su family. Look at Su Qing's appearance, and then look at your other granddaughter's appearance. How dare you say something about your old Su family raising Su Qing? Do you have to worry about our old Su family? You." Mrs. Su wanted to throw a tantrum again. "You are from two families, can't we still speak fair?" Aunt Tsuehua pursed her lips and said, "Don't use the words from the past 2 years that others raised Su Qing to block my mouth. We are poor and can't raise an extra mouth. But now that Su Qing is old and can support herself, it will be unfair for you to seize someone else's property. You." Mrs. Su was about to pounce when Zhao Yukai loudly said, "Shut up, everyone." After speaking, Zhao Yukai said to Mr. Su and Mrs. Su, "Uncle Su, Auntie Su, let's not talk about the past. Now, Miss Su Qing is asking for her to pass a loan, and the document that her mother separated from your old Su family is still kept by the brigade. So today, we will make the decision. You count the things and return them to Miss Su Qing. From now on, Miss Su Qing will still be from your old Su family." "No way." Mrs. Su reflexively refused. "No way." Zhao Yukai snorted coldly and looked at old Su. "Uncle Su, do you think the same?" Old Su took a puff of dry tobacco and said, "Captain, you know, we were kind enough to take Su Qing back when we saw that she was young and couldn't support herself alone." Zhao Yukai didn't wait for old Su to finish speaking before waving his hand and saying, "Uncle Su, why did you take Su Qing back to the old house? The reason behind it is clear to you that we villagers are not fools either. Before, Su Qing was obedient and we didn't want to interfere. But today, since Miss Su Qing made a request, I, as the team leader, have to handle it fairly. Do you think so, Uncle Su?" Old Su choked on Zhao Youcai's words and secretly glared at Su Qing. Su Qing just ignored it. Her goal today was to completely distance herself from the old Su family and then slowly clean up this group of top-notch individuals. Zhaoshuyuan.com. Seeing that old Su was silent, Zhao Yukai said, "Uncle Su, if you insist on refusing and think that my team leader and village branch secretary are useless, then I will have to report to the authorities. Nowadays, those who seize property, abuse children, and engage in marriage and business against women's wishes can all be caught in the fence. If the police come to your old Su's house to arrest people, we won't be able to control them." As soon as she heard that she was going to be arrested by the police again, Mrs. Su was confused and patted her thigh, howling, "What's going on at home? I even got involved with the police." "Captain, don't scare my old lady, she's not scared too much either." "Is that right? Why not give it a try?" Wang Xiehong, who had not spoken much on the side, spoke up. "People from the Lao Su family. Who dares to try? What if I try and die?" As soon as Shirtu Nyang heard about marriage and business plans to enter the bureau, she quickly pulled Shirtu and hid on the side without daring to speak, afraid of being noticed by Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong. "Okay, divide and divide." Old Su sighed fiercely, feeling a bit puzzled as Su Qing, who had always been obedient, suddenly demanded to part ways. Is it true that he was stimulated by the idea of marrying a fool? But no matter what, in front of the team leader, village branch secretary, and so many villagers, he couldn't bite and say no separation anymore. Firstly, there is still evidence of separation, and secondly, if the public security really manages this matter, how many of them, old Sue's family, will still go in? That would be even more embarrassing. Old man. Mrs. Su still didn't want to. Mr. Su gave Mrs. Su a glare and said to Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong, then let Miss Air live in those 2 rooms before. Mrs. Su jumped and said, she's just a dead girl. How could she live in 2 rooms with such a big face, only 1 room? Chapter 8. Unwillingness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Zhao Yukai ignored Mrs. Su and looked at her and asked, Miss Su Qing, what are your own thoughts? In the past, Su Qing remained silent and bullied in the old Su family without saying a word of hardship to anyone. She endured it on her own without making any demands. However, today, Su Qing can make her own demands. In Zhao Youcai's opinion, Su Qing has her own ideas, so he wants to hear what Su Qing thinks. Su Qing pursed her lips and said, Captain, village chief. Before, I was thinking that they were really my mistresses. I could just endure some things and think about my family. They only treat me poorly and have a limit. But now, they not only want to sell me to a fool as their wife, but also locked me up in the house yesterday, trying to create the illusion of me having an affair with that fool and directly ruin my reputation. I dare not want such a family. Upon hearing Su Qing's words, everyone was in an uproar. The Tsuehua aunties who had been in the old Su family before also testified for Su Qing, which made the villagers even more disrespectful towards the old Su family. They had seen someone exchange their daughter and granddaughter for a dowry, but this was the first time they had seen someone who wanted to ruin their granddaughter's reputation with their own hands. Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong nodded. Who dares to have such a family? Seeing that Mrs. Su wanted to splash, she immediately spoke up to stop it. As Su Qing continued, this time, all I want is to go back to my own house. I have 2 rooms in my house and the yard my mom used to surround. Then, I have to return my belongings, including the 5 cabinets, boxes, tables and chairs, pots, and water tanks and rice jars. In addition, there is my uncle's job, which was written in the separation documents back then. When I turn 16, he will return it to me. As for the money in the family before, Su Qing didn't mention it. The old Su family never found the money in the family. Before the mother of the original owner left, she specially hid the money savings and some valuable things, and only told the original owner. However, the original owner always resented being abandoned, so she never touched those things. By the way, as well as this year's work division, I hope the team leader can name me, otherwise I won't have any food to eat. Su Qing thought about the issue of work division and quickly said. Yes, yes. Everyone nodded. Mrs. Su was so angry that she jumped her feet and said, You heartless brat, you're not greedy. You're trying to empty our old Su family. You're going too far, your conscience has been eaten by the dog. Su Tao is also anxious. If she returns the 2 rooms to Su Qing, where will she live? Su Qing ignored Mrs. Su and only hid beside Aunt Tao and Aunt Tsuehua. Aunt Tao and Aunt Tsuehua protected Su Qing with great care and said, Captain, Su Qing is not an unreasonable girl at all. She just wants to go back to her own home. What's so unreasonable? Zhao Yukai nodded and looked at old Su seriously. Uncle Su, I think Su Qing is right. Let's sort out everything today. Old Su felt a bit anxious in his heart. It's easy to talk about the house and yard, and even the things and job responsibilities of those guys are easy to talk about. If it's a big deal, he can return them, but the boss's job cannot be returned. Now that the boss is in the county town, he can earn more than 30 yuan a month. If he returns his job, he will lose more than 30 yuan in income in the next month, and then these days will be very tense. Second girl, your uncle is already familiar with that job now, and besides, that job is not suitable for you as a girl. Su looked at Su Qing with a warning expression in his eyes and said, even if the job is returned to you, you can't do it. Isn't that a waste? Cut, Uncle Su, what you're saying is not right. One of the villagers watching laughed and said, even if your Su Xinghua's current job is not something that Miss Su Qing can do, she can still find a job that she can do. I've heard that there are so many jobs that girls in their factory can do. Yes, yes, the people around quickly agreed. Mrs. Su shouted angrily, what's up with you? Nowadays, everything big and small at home has been brought up in a flurry today. Mrs. Su didn't even want to face it anymore, so she sat cross-legged on the ground and slapped her thighs with her throat, shouting, my eldest son's job, no one wants to snatch it. If you want to snatch it, just step over from my old lady. Oh, Su Qing, you heartless little brat, you must die hard. You're trying to force the two of us to death, you're unfilial. Enough. As Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong watched Mrs. Su splash on the ground, a hint of disgust flashed in their eyes. When they wanted to take care of Su Qing's affairs, Mrs. Su just splashed and said that whoever was in charge of Su Qing would let her go to whoever's house to eat. They used to do this, but today they still use this trick. It's useless. Uncle Su, just say whether you agree to Su Qing's demands or not. If you don't agree, then we'll report it to the higher authorities. Zhao Yukai gave a final ultimatum. Work is not good. Old man Su bit hard and refused to return to work. Su Qing doesn't really want to work either. She has a special ability and can do well no matter what. She really can't adapt to having to work from 9 to 5. So Su Qing pursed her lips and said, Captain, village chief, if my master insists on not returning his job, then I won't have that job. After listening to Su Qing's words, the Su family had not yet had a chance to be happy, so they continued, then return the money to me at the price of selling the job. Ah, you damn girl, how dare you ask for money? Mrs. Su scolded Su Qing, pointing at her. Uncle Su, if you don't care about Aunt Su anymore, then. Before Zhao Yukai could finish speaking, Old Man Su kicked Old Lady Su and said, please shut up. When should we speak? When should we not speak? I don't know. If we continue to make noise, if the team leader and others really throw the blame onto the Public Security Bureau, how can their Old Su family handle it well? Old Su has a clear mind, but in this matter of Su Qing, the Old Su family is unreasonable. Don't be fooled by Mrs. Su's usual arrogance, but she has always been afraid of Mr. Su. When she was young, she was really beaten hard, and now she still has psychological trauma. So, when Mr. Su kicked her, she immediately shut up. Okay, Su said to Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong as he saw that Mrs. Su had calmed down. Then give the money to Miss Air, but we don't have that much money at home, at most 50. 50. Someone laughed and said, Uncle Su, who are you sending? Although we are muddy legs, we also know that a formal worker's job in the county can be worth at least 500 to 600. We don't have that much money at home, said Old Su, biting his family to death as they were poor and had no money. Su Qing pursed her lips and said, Uncle's monthly salary is only over 30 yuan. Although the original owner didn't say anything, she actually knew everything, so it was also convenient for Su Qing at this time. What? Su Xinghua's monthly salary is over 30 yuan. These villagers don't even know that the people of Lao Su's family used to keep their salary a secret and never told the villagers. Be good, some people calculate that if it's over 30 yuan per month, it's around 400 yuan per year. After 6 years, it's around 2,400 yuan. Even if it needs to be spent on a regular basis, at least 1,000 yuan can be saved, right? They are digging food in the fields, and it's not bad if they can earn more than 10 yuan a year. With so much money, how can they cry for poverty? Suddenly, the villagers looked at the people of the Old Su family with incorrect eyes. Chapter 9. 500 yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, Zhao Yukai said, Uncle Su, if you don't want to speak well anymore, then let's go to the Women's Federation in the Public Security Bureau. I think there will always be a place where you are willing to speak well, don't you think so? Old Su felt suffocated as he thought about going out to get money. His heart was like being cut by a knife. Old Su wanted to howl, but when she thought about what Old Su had said earlier, she kept the words she wanted to scream in her chest, unable to move up or down, causing her chest to become blocked. Captain, how much should I give to the second girl? This job is something that Old Su is unwilling to return to Su Qing, not to mention that it is an iron rice bowl. Even if Su Xinguo retires in the future, his grandson can still take over. Zhao Yukai discussed with Wang Xiehong for a moment, and then whispered to Su Qing, Miss Su Qing, look, how about asking your grandparents to pay 500 yuan to buy your father's job? With a look of trust and dependence on her face, Su Qing nodded softly and said, it's all up to the captain and village chief to make the decision. Thank you so much today. You child, why don't you thank me? You've suffered all these years. Looking at Su Qing's full face of trust, Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong also felt guilty. They didn't do well these years and didn't help this child support themselves. Zhao Yukai said to Old Su, Uncle Su, if your family pays 500 yuan to Miss Su Qing, it will be considered buying this job. From now on, this job will belong to your Su Xinguo family and has nothing to do with Miss Su Qing. What, 500 yuan? That's so much. Mrs. Su jumped up from the ground with a loud cry and howled, No, I don't have 500 yuan at home. A lowly girl, she really thinks she's gold and jade, and she still needs 500 yuan, regardless of whether she's worthy or not. Mr. Su's face turned black and he said, that's too much. Old Lady Su was so hateful that she wanted to pounce on Su Qing and said, you damn girl, you're trying to force your own father and mother to death. You're unfilial, you're going to be punished. Before Su Laotai could pounce on Su Qing, the aunt who had been protecting her before stopped her and said, Su auntie, you're not right. You're taking advantage of their work and not willing to give money. The landlord hired a tenant farmer and still had to give food, which is too much. Who is the landlord rich? Who is the landlord rich? Mrs. Su said, my family has 8 generations of poor farmers. Enough, please calm down for me. Old Su scolded old Madam Su when he saw Zhao Yukai and Wang Xiehong looking at us with black faces. Come back. Today, their old Su family's face was really lost. Humph. Zhao Youcai's face darkened. You don't have one. He doesn't have Su Xinguo yet. He's been saving 300 or 400 yuan a month for 6 years, how can he save 500 yuan? Besides, this is a lifelong iron rice bowl. If he doesn't want it, he'll give it back to Su Qing. That's his father's job, and even if he takes over, he should let Su Qing take over. Su Qing silently gave Zhao Yukai a thumbs up in her heart, scolding her well. At the same time, Su Qing was also somewhat speechless about her original body. If her original body had the desire to resist, with the support of the team leader and village branch secretary, no matter what, it would not have been polished into the current appearance by the old Su family's sparring over the years. Inheriting the memories of her original self, Su Qing has a lot of sympathy for her original self, but she cannot agree with her actions. Even if she hates her mother for abandoning her, she cannot ignore herself. Old Su was choked by Zhao Yukai and couldn't speak, so he went to stare at Su Qing again. Zhao Yukai said, Uncle Su, don't stare at the children either. Just one sentence, can it be okay? If not, let's meet with the Women's Federation and the Public Security Bureau. Okay. Old Su gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, knowing that he couldn't dodge today. He said, that's 500, but it'll take some time. Let's wait for our family to gather some money. Old man Su thought, I promised you today. As for whether I will give you back, it's not up to their family the final say. Anyway, it's okay to fool people today. Can you really ask for money after you become a girl? What's the point of slowing down? Wang Xiehong frowned and said, we'll cash in on the money today. If your family doesn't have it, let Xingli go to the county to find Xinghua to get it. This matter can't be delayed. Uncle Su, Su Qing, this girl has been polished like this by your sparring. Since we are in charge of this matter today, we can't start with a tiger and start with a snake. Do you think so? Old Su is angry, it's you. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Su said to Mrs. Su, go and take 500 yuan to give to Miss Air. When Su Xingjun was here before, he would pay 10 yuan to his family every month. Later, Su Xinghua did the same. Over the years, the old Su family naturally saved no less than 500 yuan, so it was easy to give out 500 yuan. However, he didn't want to give this money to Su Qing. And when the villagers around heard old Su's words, they envied the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com and grew up. Sure enough, this old Su family is rich, 500 yuan, and they said they would take it out. Of course, some people also turned their gaze to Su Qing. A 16-year-old girl who is about to own her own house and has a huge sum of 500 yuan in her hand, it seems like she is the perfect choice for her daughter. Law. Suddenly, someone moved their mind. When Mrs. Su heard that she was really going to give out 500 yuan, she immediately became unwilling and was about to howl again when she was glared at by Mr. Su, so she had to curse and return to the room. For a moment, in the courtyard of the old Su family, it was quiet and everyone had their own thoughts. Su Tao stood behind Tian Aixiang, looking at Su Qing in anger, feeling a little uneasy. Su Qing separated from the old Su family, and who would marry that fool later? She definitely can't go. She's going to marry into the county town, and she should find a husband who eats commodity grain. What should she do? What should she do now that everyone knows about her sharing a room with that fool? Su Qing's hand clenched fiercely, and she couldn't think of any ideas for a moment. And Shitunyang, on the other hand, pulled Shitunyang and hid in the corner, listening to the fact that the old Su family had so much money and also wanted to give Su Qing 500 yuan. Suddenly, her gaze wandered around Su Qing's body, and then she looked at Su Tao again, her eyes rolling back and forth, as if weighing something in her heart. In no time, Mrs. Su was holding a stack of money wrapped in a handkerchief in her hand and was about to throw it at Su Qing. Her mouth was still dirty and she said, "Here, 500 yuan, you dead girl from the plague." "Wait a moment," Zhao Yukai said, "Auntie Su, give me the money first, and I will act as an intermediary on my end, so as not to argue again in case the money doesn't match." Mrs. Su's hand stiffened when she heard the words about throwing money. Chapter 10. Dust Settling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text.